Hey guys, it's Al from Altruistic Channel, and I'm coming to you with a sort of bedtime story. So, for many of you who have been following my channel up until this point, you have noticed the evolution of Ascension. And part of the process is to become balanced with your inner parts of the ego, which is the personality, the body itself, and the soul. And the soul's connection to the body and getting it to do what it requires, and then them merging and becoming one. In the same way that the earth is changing and becoming a sacred planet. And so this is as much her story as it is your story, as both parties are becoming sacred either planets or sacred beings, which are one and the same. In a cosmos that is connected to the superconsciousness. And so the superconsciousness, let's say, is the big brain that operates our solar system or our existence. And it is requiring a change. And it's asking of the planet to evolve into a sacred place, a sacred being, housing sacred beings. Within it, it houses what's called the swamps for the cosmos, where starseeds come, or nobility comes, or other entities and other energies manifest into physical form, and they process an existence in the physical world, protected and guarded from any other energies around it, in order for it to incubate, change, pass the test that it needs to pass in order to reign in the abundance that comes with becoming a sacred being or a logos or whatever you want to call it. And so, if you've been watching the channel, you have seen my evolution through the process, and so I'm supposed to share with you the end of what we're heading into, which is news to me, so we're going to see how this channels. About 2 to 3 years ago, a lot of us that were spiritual people were tasked with remembering who we were. And it was the first of the onsets of people awakening, right? So we had been asleep in slumber, and this is where the bedtime story comes in. So many moons ago, we, the society, humanity itself, with the earth was asleep. And what happened is that at a certain point in time, when we had gotten to a point where we had learned enough, we were triggered to remember who we were, and that we were then supposed to track down backwards our past in order to regain ourselves for present tense, and then be able to operate as those beings moving forward. So as the awakening happened, some people became ascended masters, and they started to trickle in and master the domain of either emotional or physical, mental, egoish, or heart. And then, at a certain point, when enough of those people combine their efforts and successfully accomplish the mission at hand, the energy level of the earth would be enough to raise the frequency and in it to a place where where the frequency can exist at a peaceful level where it would be consistent. And so Earth awoke. And she awoke to a cyclical pattern that had been going on where we were stuck in a rut. And in order for her vibration to raise, our vibration once again had to raise. And so a larger percentage, known as the 1972 to about Generation X, were tasked with a more accelerated, that's why there's a smaller generation. They were tasked as warriors to show up as sacred beings. They would have to remember their sacredness in order to raise the vibration of the planet. This is a theory that I'm getting, a channeling. And one of the tasks was to work through the illusions around us in order to see the veils lift enough each year, slowly. And so more of us began to question things. And so the JFK thing was a really big indicator that something was up. The Vietnam War, the AIDS epidemic, all of this started to build karma in a way that was super fast and very detrimental. And so as Gaia awoke to what was going on in her, like, as you know, she's our mother figure, it triggered the collective consciousness to awaken, meaning that instead of individualized beings, we started to connect with each other in ways that was like subliminal, current-related frequency. And God was a big factor in that, or what you call God. We call it the divine, the source of all things, universal superconscious, whatever you have. I'm going to call it the divine. And so the divine started to task specific beings to come to the earth, sacred beings. These are beings that either were already masters or were about to become masters. Their karma was clean and they had to come work through some stuff. And so that's why it's called the swamps, is because beings that come here come from all over the galaxy. Our understanding of existence is still new, and we're still trying to work through this illusion that we are all just this. And obviously we're not. There's something that I'm looking out from, and I'm looking at my soul incarnate. And so the task was to remember who we were. And it began with some of us being born into more detrimental situations, things that were really unpleasant. These were tasks that would be considered the collective consciousness, Christ consciousness task, which was that beings were to enter the earth in such conditions that were so toxic and understand the illusion, grow and prosper despite continuous backlog and continuous suppression and continuous burdens, and they couldn't lift this cloud from them. And the better they did, meaning the more that they kept getting up and getting up, the more it triggered these memories, and so they started to become warriors. And these warriors are celestial warriors. They don't know that they're sacred beings. They don't know that they've already accomplished something by agreeing to come here. But the task was not that. The task was to remember that, carry the information forward subliminally at a subconscious level, meaning the lower extremity was still not talking to the top. And they knew that there was something special about their purpose on life. No matter how bad things got, these beings knew that they were sacred beings. They were beings that were going to get something out of this, but not in an egoish way, out of a sense of pride, nobility, kingships, queenships. These are people who are humble or live in the humility. These are people who don't assume that they're going to get anything out of life, but they can't stop trying because something in them is driving them, and that is the soul. So the body then manifests the soul's intention, and so it began. And so then the wider awakening grew, and spirituality started to change, and we started to have conflict between religion and spirituality on an ongoing basis, which makes sense. Because if you look at what a religion used to be, it was originally just a place to remember the divine and to funnel and channel in the energy of a patriarchal system, a father figure. But the human aspect, the body, interpreted it as in ways that would suppress women or that would be homophobic or that would be this or would start wars or all of this stuff. And so it was the battle between the souls and the bodies that began to reign supreme. And Gaia was still asleep. But when she awoke, there was enough energy frequency where beings started to connect with the soul. And the soul was starting to be able to communicate. And so we started to get much more Princess Diana's, Mother Teresa's, the Buddha. All of these supreme beings were tapping from the universal consciousness down into these beings and pulling the personality up and entering into these beings. Same person, same thing, just a different version of them, an upgrade was what we call it. So as the more the frequency started to change, it started to awaken the earth. And so the more that we got higher and higher, the more the earth started to balance. And the earth awoke and realized what was going on. And so then was made aware that her children were in desperate need of assistance and that they needed to remember who they were. And so there started to be much more earthquakes and much more volcanic eruptions, and it started to change the way we are. And then slowly but surely, the Renaissance came around. Now, this is a very key point in our little bedtime story, because the Renaissance tapped into what we consider a different mindset. It is the artistic expression of the divine, and it reigned supreme during the darkest of times. And the most incredible art started to come out, including the Adam and Eve story, the creation of Adam on the Sistine Chapel. And within that, it was an inside joke from the above beings, the souls that were merging with the bodies. They were kind of having a chuckle at us because it was a clue. And so our task was to register the beauty of art as a communication vehicle and use it to follow the breadcrumbs backwards in order to progress forward. And so it starts for me at least, it started with the creation of Adam, where you can see God physically having breasts, right? In a male physique. And it made me question a bunch of stuff. And so then the fact that I personally was raped by Jesus, by a man who emulated Jesus, further isolated my existence from the Roman Catholic Church. And I turned my back on it very quickly because I could not understand a religion that was affiliated with child molesters, which is foreshadowed. Because what would happen later is, as we all can see, the church decided to relocate all of its child molesters to different parts of the world so that they could keep preying on children and never right align themselves. And so now that system is falling apart. In fact, it's completely been, everyone just went kaboom, it's gone. But the story doesn't stop there. Beings that were on the planet that were being born during this particular process were the beings that would be triggered by events that would make sure that they never stopped looking for the truth. And so it started, for example, with mine. So I'll share my story. So I was raped by a man who emulated Jesus Christ. And then I ended up in a cult, and I literally, my soul was torn apart, and I was rebuilt in a very, very fucked up way. And I started to have all these questions, and so my pursuit was on, right? And so all these beings that we call elders that are stepping into their roles are basically ascended masters. They're either remembering who they are, which is what's descending down right now, or they are themselves becoming sacred beings. And most of you will find out this weekend where you fall if you are one of these people. Like Saint Germain's here, the Buddha's here, Confucius is here, Christ is here. All of them are present. And they've been watching us through the chosen ones. These are people who are sanctified, if you will, holy beings that came here agreeing to the worst conditions and suffering that the world can understand because it was carrying what we call Christ consciousness. And so whereas Christ paid for the sins of Adam and Eve and that whole gap, after Christ, the sacred beings picked up the Christ consciousness. And so as everybody started to awaken and more people started to do the mojo to work this out and try to question and follow the Renaissance and see how the Bible and the Torah and all of these things are layered with clues to astrological coordinates, and astrology plays a big factor, and then that took off. And then suddenly more people knew about astrology than they knew about the Bible. And so then that fluctuated, and so then esoteric astrology became super important, and that whole wave came through. And then next came esotericism, which is the truth of enlightenment. You get to an end result that makes you feel like there's nothing beyond that, and from that you're supposed to create the next part of the story. And so all of these things were layered in top secret and part of the top 2%. It was a power thing. But what happened is that sacred beings don't work for the government. They don't work for humanity. They work to help humanity. Some of them aren't even human. Some of these are humanoids from other places, let's say. It depends on where your creation goes, right? Depends on your mindset. For me, I'm a little bit more scientific, so I'm just going to go with the legend of where we're at. And so as these beings started to get more and more lost, because remember, they came down here to do specific things, but it wasn't clear how this would manifest because ultimately it's up to the being. And so the being getting lost more and more and being raped and being mutilated and being sodomized against their will and being like tortured and being left in cults and suffering all these things, they were lost in terror in a fear structure. And so the swamps is what it became known as because all the beings that came down here to do the collective consciousness effort to unite humanity got lost in the swamps. That's why it's the ultimate test for us as beings. We kept thinking that we were the sacrifice. We kept thinking that we were going to go to hell and burn. What we never realized is that we were already creating hell, that it is a man-made disease that we spread throughout our communities because we need something to keep us in check. Because if you push too far, then you get answers, and the answers may not be what you want, and that's the ultimate fear, and that's what death is. Even though immortality common sense is write a book. If you write a book, you are immortal. It's like a chip. It just continues on beyond you. So no matter what happens, you will exist in every timeline because you have a record of being there. And so when people read it, it anchors your energy back. And so that's where that came in. So as Gaia was awakened now and all of these beings were now activated, the divine had to do what's called the dark night soul. And so most of these beings at some point in their life became almost killed. It was like just enough protection that they wouldn't die, but that would push them to the brink. And they would see him hurt it. And in the process, it would ignite who they were. And then they would have to go down the fast track, which is what everybody on the planet is about to do. And so for me, it was with the guy pulling the trigger on my head, and I'm assuming I died on some level, and then I didn't, and then I came back for a reason, and I knew it. And it sent me down the rabbit hole, and then I started going down to astrology, esotericism, and all this stuff, and I started to look at mysticism, and I started to kind of compile my own philosophy in order to get to where I'm at now, which is the person who's going to help you with this bedtime story understand the next phase when you come back from judgment, what you call judgment. In philosophy, it's just the superconsciousness descending into the conscious body, right? The soul of the people who are affected by this, your soul and your body have already chosen each other and they have merged. And now you are working on the descending superconsciousness attaching itself to the soul and the body and then pulling up that energy in order to become one and present itself to the world at large in the way that it chooses to manifest through that vehicle. And so through that avatar. And so even though we didn't know it, all of us were on borrowed time and we were basically assessing what was going on in the world. And so there were beings that were masters that came through that are yet to understand which one they are. These are beings that have already done the work or that are sacred beings from other places that God trusts. And He sent us down to remember this. But the thing is that once you get to a certain point, you surrender your life to the divine, and that's what Ascension is. And you surrender it in order to finalize what it is that you need to do at the end result. But what we knew was that when enough of those beings were on the planet, and enough of them were doing it successfully and not in competition, that it would trigger a mass awakening. But we were under the impression that it would come in waves, one smaller wave and then another wave and then another wave, or two big waves. And that we would teach and provide them with a pathway. But God doesn't do things and tell us what it is going to do. The divine does what it needs to do, and it surprises us in order to keep us going, right? And so it's divine timing. And so this is divine will. And so then suddenly in esotericism, it became one of the biggest things. I will make this work. I will do this. And your will becomes your philosophy. And your philosophy becomes your driving force. And your driving force becomes your energy sequence. And then your frequency rises. And then as you rise, you ascend and you ascend and you ascend and you ascend. Catch. This is the first time that we've ever done it while alive. Typically, when you go from the third initiation to the fourth initiation, like Christ did, you die. You surrender yourself to not having to be in a physical form anymore, and you release the body in order to go on in the cosmos. That's what esotericists believe. And so I've got to that point, and we all are getting to that point, but then you have to surrender. And so since no one has any bearings on how this works, everybody's kind of scrambling because there's no precedent. We think we know, but we don't. And how is this manifesting? Well, the elders, what I call the elders, these are people who successfully have remembered who they are now in positions of helping others. And they're doing it either through psychic abilities, telekinesis, or whatever it is. And they're tapping into an immediate relationship with the divine. And these beings don't know what's about to happen. So what happens is that you do your task, and at a certain point you surrender yourself. And typically it goes along the lines of this in the swamps. I can't handle anymore. I really can't handle anymore. If something doesn't happen here, if you don't step in for me, Lord, I'm going to kill myself, or something ridiculous like that. But it's meant to be that hard in order to pressure and pop you into asking for its divine guidance. And so the moment that happens, your guides come, and it's the angels and your guides. They just descend on you, and they start working with you, and you start getting these intuitive nuances, and you start to understand things. You start to like get hints, and you start to become aware of tags, like things that people paint on walls, and you start to see sequences that don't add up, and so your veils start to fall, in different aspects to where you're now aware that you were asleep before. And that conscious state of self-awareness is what triggers the guides to help you and to trigger the divine to come to you. And so then your task is to essentially face judgment for what you have done in order to karmically cleanse yourself for the next phase. And so in evolution, that would mean that you, for those of us who were Catholic, I went up to judgment. I've told a story. If you're a scientist, you will have a different experience and it's going to be much harsher. I don't know how it works for you, but at some point you will beg for it, or not. I don't. Well, yeah, beg. You're going to beg because you're living in denial. You think we're accidental, and there's no probability of that whatsoever. And now that the world has shut down, you have even less to stand on. So I suggest you hit your knees and start praying and figure out what it is that you believe in outside of yourself, because that's very egoish. That was not my wording. That was not my wording. Like I said, this is an interesting challenge. And so when you trigger this aspect, for me, because I was a Catholic, and because of what I'd gone through and what I'd said into the universe in anger, I was I was asleep and I had a horrible fever. And right when the fever broke, I heard a huge horn over my ear. It was so loud that it stopped my heart. I was gone for about 10 minutes. It did not come back on. And I rode up to, well, actually showed up on a ship first. I don't know what the ship has to do with it. At the time, it made sense later when I understood the arcs. But so I go on this boat. The window breaks. I go out to the Sea of Souls. I'm in the Sea of Souls, and out of nowhere, a train on my left side comes up with all these white Anglo-Saxon people going, and they're heading up thinking they're going to heaven. No, they're not. They're going to face judgment. But because it wasn't my task to face judgment, I was sent to a tunnel to directly meet someone very important. I can tell you what it was. That is your journey. But let's say there was physical contact that triggered my life back into ticking, and it was like tick, 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 and I was brought back down to the body. Understanding my task subconsciously, which is very interesting because you would think that at that level, they would want us to truly know what it is that we're trying to do. But again, you're in the swamps. You're trying to you're either working directly for the divine or you are somehow connected to the kingdoms of the cosmos. And you are essentially proving yourself, and what you don't know is you're also proving your family ancestral line. So if you're from another galaxy, if you believe in that, or if you're a Star Wars fan and you believe in that, or a star seed, or a deity, a humanoid type of thing, whatever your philosophy is, you start to understand that it's not just human ancestry. You are representing your nation. You're representing your breed of consciousness from wherever it is. And you are basically being monitored and watched by animals, babies, homeless, prisoners, people who you think are lost. They have been monitoring you. In the midst of that, there are elders, people that have been experiencing the worst of humanity as part of their task in order to receive their abundance. But that was the divine's exchange. These beings voluntarily gave themselves up on behalf of their kingdom or their nobility or their kingship. These are kings and queens, emperors and empresses that basically sacrificed themselves for humanity. It was a way for us to help Gaia reach Sacred Planet. These are beings that seeded the world. These are people who gave you the consciousness where you're at. Somehow we made the evolutionary jump, very key, from to understanding how to make electricity and so forth, and phone go through the wire, and we're experiencing that gap. And it's very important you understand that. This is a gap. We're going to do a quantum jump, right? In the process, these beings that are so important were cloaked. And they've been protected the entire time. But by protecting, that also means that they have been put through hell because they never got promotions. They never were acknowledged. These are amazing authors, singers, writers. These are screenwriters. These are people who are creationists that have been cloaked for their own protection and until now had never realized that. And so they have just suffered. They have just been suffering in a self-induced victimization mindset because they didn't understand the context that they were actually being protected, that there were worse things that could have happened to them and that would have happened to them because these people have been attacked. There's been energy coming at these beings from the beginning. Remember who they are. These are not just any beings. These are kings and queens, or at least their kids, proving themselves to the divine and the universe, the universal consciousness. These are super brain cells that are existing from the master brain that are coming down here to redirect traffic, to make massive changes to the way that we live and operate. And everybody likes comfort. So it's a self-sabotageal mindset that even the divine was having to work through. And as replicas of that, we've been helping. That's what we've been doing. And so enter Gaia. So Gaia is going sacred, which means that the divine is now actively wanting a change, and the universe is helping it by pressurizing it. And so all of us are now in a state of free fall. Either you are ascending or you are descending, right? That's where you're at. But the beings that you have been overlooking and torturing and psychically attacking and making fun of and gossiping and ruining their lives and purposely going out of your way, even though you didn't know why you hated these people, they have been recording your every action. And they are so sacred that they are now, what I heard specifically was, we've seen enough. We have seen enough. I'm going to say it one more time because they want me to say it again. We've seen enough. And it was with that cadence, enough. And here's what I mean. Unknowingly, these beings will never be affected by the coronavirus. They have gone through spiritual versions of it in order to ascend, in order to understand how to lead people through this crisis, which is just an illusion. But in order to do that, they would have to go out into the world continuously. And we have. And it's been one of those things where, like I said, suddenly I was very worried about the homeless. They disappeared from New Orleans. And the moment that happened, I started to feel a pressure build. And then the people around me started to react in ways that became very self-serving and very, oh, don't go outside. If you go outside, you're putting us in danger, forgetting there's a whole world out there. And so when I heard we've seen enough, I knew what it meant. That means that this weekend, it divides. So, those of you who go up to judgment, this is why it's a bedtime story. You will dream, if you are Catholic, that you are facing judgment. If you are more philosophical, then you will feel the pressure of from the violet flame, and you will feel the spread of the fire through you. And all of you have different ways of looking at this, but you are facing initiation. This is it, right? And so as you fade into this delusion of your own mind that you are facing judgment, understand that you will be asked, what have you done with your life? What have you done for humanity? And do you have any regrets? And when I say you better show up with honesty, integrity, and humility, I guarantee you if you don't, it will hurt. This is not these are universal things. They have been watching you from the way you kill lizards. If you kill lizards, good luck. If you know what I mean? Like if you go out of your way to add pain and suffering to the world, if you've robbed people over and over again and got away with it, you don't. You're going to burn. Like it's just, that's the way it is. It's a measure of who you are, and now you're going to have to atone for it. So when you go up, this is why it's a bedtime story, you will be asleep. And you will, if you have done well, you will get an option to not return and finish this out and exit and go into what you consider heaven, whatever that mindset is for your brain cell as you die off. But if you choose to return, your path continues, and you're going to have to work your little ass off in the next 6 months or so. I got 6 months to align myself with my task, and it was not obvious. They didn't give you instructions. It's intuitive. You have to follow your instincts. And so I started with Mr. Meter in esoteric astrology, and from that, the divine started to present me as I did well with different key people, teachers, world teachers that have been tapped to ascend. And you will find them on YouTube or in whatever way it manifests, but it depends on your awareness, right? So when you come back, you will have to find which of your ancestors you have the most in common with, track that down, understand that it's not just an ancestor, it's you, and then track it all the way back as far as they'll let you. Take the pain of what it is, absorb the knowledge from it, and then let that past go. because you're anchoring all of those, if it's not you, all of your ancestors like balloons to your karma. And you have them on your back because you won't let mommy and daddy go because they died when you were very young. Let them go because they can't ascend, they can't go without that. And so you're tracking all of this karma. In doing so, you are also anchoring all of the karmic debt from your ancestral line down into you. And since we're making the transition, that's going to fuck you up. So you get the information, you assess what you need to, and then you let it go. And from that, you're going to find exactly what your life path is because it's going to be an ongoing pattern. And then you're going to figure out from that what it is you need to do, which is you're supposed to acknowledge the good traits and the bad traits from everyone around you, everyone you love, and assess them. If they are toxic people, self-sacrificing people, people who are victimized, who will not grow, they're limited in their mindset and they can't move beyond that, let them go. Because if you don't, those same people are low vibration enough that they will manipulate it in order to hurt you, physically hurt you. And so you have to disassociate. Brothers and sisters, mommies and daddies, everybody has to wage this war for themselves because it's an illusion, right? And so you're trying to prove that you understand your connection to the divine. And so if the divine is telling you you are not in alignment and you're not, and you deny it, then all hell's about to break loose for you. And it's going to be even worse for you than it was for me. I did it voluntarily. Kind of, because again, some of us were tasked to remember, and so once we remembered, there's no going back. It's not like you can turn it back to the hands of time. And time is irrelevant. We're cycling, right? So the cycles are hitting each other, and that's why the world came to a stop, is because right now there's so much convergence of energy, and we're going to make a switch. And so this is where it's key. So those of you who come back from judgment, who decide that you are warriors and worthy of the kingships, queenships that you're fighting for, and to represent your race or your people or your family, you get additional tasks. You have to prove yourself in getting through your shadow, getting over your mental inability to let go of victimization and your need for stuff. Like you have to work through that. Your physical, your emotional, your mental, your heart, and any type of trauma that you've suffered, you have to work through it, acknowledge it, and then release that energy in order to get new energy. You think it's done? No. Then you have to build your arcs, meaning everyone around you that you've decided to keep in your world must be for your highest good, because they're all either real or simulations to help you remember who you are. And so as you do that, you then have to build these arcs, which is who's coming with you into this new world. Those of you who are still alive after 2020, this is you. What are the traits and what are the things that you like or dislike from other people? And here's a hint. If you dislike something heavily in someone else, look to you first before you bring it to the divine, because it's a reflection of you. It's something you haven't dealt with yet. And so see how this gets? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're going to have a short amount of time to do this. And they're going to monitor you through the lower frequencies, people that you have castigated out of society, people that you have literally forgotten about, animals, the way you treat animals, very Buddhist. All of these principles are going to play a huge part in your kids. Kids, animals, the homeless, prisoners, and people in insane asylums are all going to be your judge and jury because they are all God's angels, if you're a version of God or whatever you believe in. And so then you're going to be called back up to judgment and assess your improvement. If you do not do what you said you were going to do, and if you come to them in victimized mentality and not being able to have gotten through it on your own, you don't return. You are pushed somewhere else. They have not told me where that is. That is not my monkey. It's not my show. I worked through my stuff and I did the best I could. But here's where it gets even more interesting. You still are not done yet, because then you graduate from your own karma. And you've worked through your mojo and all your bullshit and all this stuff. But remember what you've been carrying this whole time, your ancestral karma. And so this is where it gets complicated, because you don't know it, but the energies coming to you may actually be debt from your family. And so it will manifest in your twin flame. See, we've all been under the impression that twin flames are complicated just because they're twin flames, and the masculine's not doing their thing. Meanwhile, you're the feminine who hasn't mastered your masculine, and so you're basically fighting yourself. But it's not that. It's the fact that you are having to relive the betrayal of a husband who cheated on his wife in your ancestral line, and she curses into the existence of energy, a curse, by saying, I hope he never is happy again. Or, in my case, what I just realized recently was that I had worked all of my past out, and I had cleared all of the karma that went with my ancestors except one. There was one man in my family that I could not forgive for what he did to his wife and his daughter. He had 11 kids and died of alcoholism, leaving my great great grandma to die painfully alone, freezing in a world that did not let women work. And she had 11 kids, which made 4 of them end up in orphanages, including my grandma. And so I inherited that debt. And so it started to materialize in my world where I was never chosen by any of my partners. I was always carrying this cloud of karma that meant that because I could never forgive him, I never chose to forgive him, I was anchoring myself to that negativity because she must have been human and said, I hope you suffer, you son of a bitch. Because he gambled all of our money away. We were very, very powerful people. The Markings have always been super powerful. They're kings and queens from Spain. And he succumbed to drug addiction. And he paid for the sins by dying and leaving her alone, desperate, and terrified. And so that karmic debt traveled through. So either I am the replication of this, or what I'm being told is that I inherited that debt because I'm actually his great grandfather, is my lineage. And so, but I'm connected to the family. And so those of us who are sacred beings that I told you about that are carrying Christ consciousness are also clearing the bloodline of any karmic debt. Surprise. And so, if you find yourself coming from nobility, kingships, queenships that have suffered and have gone through hell, ask yourself how you are representing that. Because for me, it materialized first in my becoming drug addicted and becoming an alcoholic, because that was what he did. And so I was living out that cycle again. Time is like this. And so finally, I acknowledged it, I owned up to it, and I realized who my partner is that I'm vying for right now, the chosen one that's supposed to be my mate, is her or him. And so I had to forgive that energy and absolve that karmic debt in order to enact the abundance that's about to transpire. It's the last phase of ascending to the fourth initiation, from what I understand, from what I'm told, what I'm to tell you. So you understand now that you are literally clearing all of the karmic debt for not just yourself, but for humanity by going through your ancestral line and then pulling all of that shit out and unclogging it in order for the world to do what? To help Gaia ascend, in order to not hold it down. And so that's why we're raising the vibration by doing this extra work. And so that's why I said some of you this weekend will ascend past the fourth initiation. And when you do, you will either become yourself if you have lived in your authenticity your whole life, and there's place for you, you will already know this, or you will meet with the monad, the descending energy above you of a master who has chosen you because you were always meant to be them, meaning that you are a lower version of them that they're reliving in order to make this sacred thing happen for us. And in the process, you become sacred beings. You evolve from masters to, I guess, logos. I don't remember exactly, so don't quote me on that. But you know what I mean. You get promoted. God's being promoted. Everybody's moving up the corporate ladder because the ladder has shattered. And so now what they're looking for is creationists. These are people who have created the arcs to Eden, essentially creating the ships out of the marshlands, and you are lifting off in order to raise the vibration. So right now what I'm doing is I'm waiting to see if he can forgive me, because in this incarnation we're both males. But that transcends time, right? So technically, obviously, I was a chick or he was a chick, and vice versa, whatever it was. And I'm okay with it because whatever this is, forgiveness is gratitude. Forgiveness is the key to accepting your future. You cannot be grateful if you don't understand and acknowledge where you have faltered before and make it right. And so he doesn't know this yet. And in fact, they tell me I don't have to tell this person the story until they ask me. And so I don't know how long this is going to wait, but I'm told that because I figured it out, I can drop that debt. And so all of my ancestral debt now comes off of my shoulders, which means that it'll appear to most people like I skyrocket. I'm going to jump off real fast because I'm dropping the debt. But first, this person and I have to have a conversation as to whether or not we're going to finish that cycle out or if we're going to separate because we're still tethered to each other. And so whether or not he forgives me, he's still my best friend. And so I will always be. But the moment that the decision is made from both parties, we release the karmic debt and both of us ship up and we just go. And so that's what this weekend's about. So those of you who are feeling this energy surging through the coronavirus and you know it's not going to touch you, it's not coming anywhere fucking near you people. If you are afraid of it, you get it. And if you get it, I'm going to just point out to you that you are being judged. It is a judgment on behalf of the higher self because you're living in fear, which means that you can't see the reality of the illusion. And so you're not in communion with the divine. So you're going to suffer. I'm sorry. I can't tell you any other way. But those of you who have gotten through it and are ascending, do not let anyone pull you down. If you start to find yourself in a situation where other people are starting to make you feel like you can't leave the house, like where they start to diminish your light, exit, go. You're going to be presented with a way out and just go. Because your light can't be diminished now. You are a beacon. And you're going to ascend in order to rise the ship. That kickoff, the fire, is going to be your beacon. So that's where you need to preserve yourself. And so it's putting me in a situation, putting my partner in. And so this evolution is something of quite significant across the board. And I'm just telling you this because I want you to understand a different way of looking at what you're experiencing so that you understand the context of how ascension works within the spiritual world. It is no longer about the physical world. Pentacles and money don't mean shit right now. Everybody's lost their job, and the whole world has come to a screeching halt. Think about that. Start dream big, guys. Start making these arcs and Eden connections and start building these bridges out of the marshes so that you can kick off when they tell you to go. For those of you who are elders, I'm supposed to tell you they have seen enough. This weekend, be in a safe place, get some rest. If you feel the need to sleep, then sleep because that is part of the problem. But if you do not, like you might get a surge of energy, and while everyone else goes around you, then you are to be proactive and use the time to either study continuously or to prepare yourself to kick off. Because when around Sunday, I would say, or Monday, it's going to flip on you. And then everybody else will have their process played out. But for those of you who have done right by God, if you're in right alignment with God and have figured out what your family karmic debt was, it's holding you down if you're still held down and you're still waiting, figure that shit out because in a second it's going to kick you off and you will not be recognizable. You are going to go from 0 to hero in about 2 seconds. And for those of you who are competing with each other to get a promotion, I'm supposed to tell you this, they've already crowned someone. I don't know what that means. The crown has already been issued to the people. I don't know what that means. I've never been egoish about this stuff, so I don't know. But your vibration needs to be high, and if you're competitive, you did not make the cut. And so just work on that right now, and then let that go, and then you will go. You know what I mean? Like it's just a small little tedious thing. But if you're in competition, then you create chaos or you create problems in the master level, so you can't ascend to master. You know what I mean? And if you claim that you're a master, you're probably not a master. Most masters don't want a title like that because you can never master life. It's an ongoing journey and thing. But here's a big kicker. They want me to tell you. In the past 10 days, have you put out anything into the universe that is upbeat, that is uplifting, and have you not surrendered to the fear mongering or the victimization or the scare tactics? If you have, adjust yourself quickly because we start kicking off now. And so they've seen enough. The crowns have been given. The emperors and empresses have been chosen. The descending masters have chosen their parties, and these beings are about to become unionized, right? If both parties agree. Now, here's the thing, don't be afraid. If the other person, if the twin flame does not agree, then it doesn't happen this lifetime, and you will get another opportunity. You will get someone who matches your vibration. Do not fear. In fact, have faith. This will all work out. The sun will rise. We are heading somewhere. This is going somewhere. Go with the flow. That's it for me on Alan Altruistic Channels. I hope that helped. I don't know if how this works out. I don't know who I'll see back or how you will return. I know that there are a lot of people who are sending me evil thoughts and bad mojo, and it's supposed to just get worse. Thank you for all the energy. It's been helping me a lot to kind of feel my way through this. And I love you all. Good luck. And I hope you really, truly grasp the knowledge, because you will be apparently seeing me a lot. I don't know what that means. They don't tell me that. There's a big black wall in front of me. I used to be able to see through to the future, but now it's blacked out. There's a big surprise coming for a lot of us, and I'm so excited. All right, guys. Much love and light. Good night.